On this edition of the program, Trump announces the trade deal with China and it's... We have a lot of shutdown talk with Gabe Fleisher, including some new late-breaking signs that we might actually have a thaw, and two big teased launches. One in New York, one in Texas. Happy Halloween, everybody. It's all coming up.
The following is brought to you by Just Another Pilot.
Hello and welcome everybody to this very spooky Halloween episode of the Politics program. My name is Justin Robert Young. If you are only listening to this show, then you will not see that I am dressed up as Charmander. Trick or treat, smell my feet, give me good political news to read. And I have it. Good for me, good for you, good for everybody. We have Election Day around the corner, which is always what Halloween signifies in my world. We are going to welcome Gabe Fleisher on. We're going to talk all about the shutdown, including the one weird trick that we're going to remind everybody again that Donald Trump could end all of this if he just had one note to Pam Bondi. And then in our update, we got some bipartisan talks happening. Maybe a sign this is going to wrap up early next week. And two different politicians, one in Texas, one in New York, that are making big decisions on their future. That's all to come. But we're going to start with the last thing that Donald Trump did while he was in Asia, specifically South Korea, and that was meet with Xi Jinping, his counterpart in China. They announced a trade truce. All right, not a trade deal. There was a lot of hype that was going into this announcement and this meeting, that there were some like grand bargain elements to this, up to and including possibly having China distance itself from Russia, maybe gigantic, big, century-defining decisions on Taiwan. None of that really happened at all. In fact, what we really saw was, well, I wish you would step back from that ledge, my friend. That's what I imagine was playing in the room when Trump and Xi essentially walked back a lot of the stuff that had escalated over the last several months. 100% tariffs, very draconian export controls for rare earth metals, soybean blockade. So here's what's announced. China's concessions. They have agreed to buy 12 million metric tons of U.S. soybeans immediately and 25 million tons annually for 3 years. They agree to suspend new rare earth export controls for a year, and they have promised to curb fentanyl precursor production and cooperate with the United States enforcement, essentially giving them a off-ramp to what the U.S. is going to give back. Finally, it indicated, this was apparently a late-breaking thing, indicated the possible interest in buying American energy and joining in an Alaska natural gas pipeline project. Okay, no one really saw that one coming. So what does the U.S. give back? Lowered tariffs on Chinese goods by 10 percentage points. That is to around now 45%. So it's still a high tariff relatively, but it is not as bad as it was going to. It postponed an investigation into Chinese shipbuilding and logistics practices. This essentially was going to dock, literally, Chinese shipments. There was going to be new port taxes that were going to come in China had done retaliatory efforts, and now we're not going to get any of it. And it delayed new export restrictions on subsidiaries of blacklisted firms for 1 year. Here's some stuff that was mentioned that kind of is talked about, but no big news here. Trump clarified that China won't receive access to the advanced NVIDIA Blackwell AI chip, but some NVIDIA chips will be sold. Trump essentially said this is up to Xi and NVIDIA's Jensen Huang. The meeting included discussion on ending Russia's war in Ukraine, but apparently did not include conversation about China not buying Russian oil, which is essentially the biggest thing that China could do to isolate Russia and end the war. But why would China do it when the United States is its number one global adversary and the United States is in the middle of this? Why would they do a favor to the United States? Well, the rumor was because there might have been a deal on Taiwan. Taiwan apparently not mentioned at all. And then there's this. Do any of you feel better that Xi and Trump got in a room and said that they are going to agree to not attack each other's economies for a year? I don't. Mostly because I don't believe that Xi or China in general have many qualms about using whatever leverage that they can to get what they want. And I know for a fact that Donald Trump doesn't. You know, I was talking to a friend of mine last night, and, you know, he does a lot of business out of China. And I was like, you know, I do think that Trump and Xi were just kind of made for each other. Because usually what happens with an American trade deal is it takes a really, really long time to do. And then we do it. And then there's a bunch of pomp and circumstance and everybody hands out gold pens. And there's a big hooray, 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 right? And then China would just like not do stuff. And the United States response would be, well, all right, whatever. They're not doing what we thought they were going to do, but what are we going to do? Like fight with them and tank the stock market and throw the entire United States economy into turmoil? Well, for Donald Trump, that's Monday. Like he does that all the time, sometimes probably for fun. So for whatever their ways of doing things are, Trump and Xi seem to match energies, or at least the United States under Donald Trump and China seem to match energy of like, look, if you are not doing this deal in the way that we feel is appropriate, I will alter the deal. Also, if I'm not getting what I want out of this deal, I will alter the deal. So there's that. I was left a little disappointed. I bought into the hype. And the reason why I'm going over this so much, especially with elections coming up, is that both for the off-year elections, which now, they are pretty much here. I can smell and taste the midterm elections. I don't think there's anything that matters more than the economy, and I don't think that there's any country that has more of an impact on the American economy than China. So following these deals, if there is peace, if there is stability, then that is a good sign forward that the economy, if it is going to roar, will roar. If it is going to swoon, it will swoon. But still, that's going to be the biggest thing that determines the midterms and certainly determines the next president. That is, of course, if we can open up our government. That is a gigantic question, and it is the big topic of conversation that we have with our guest, the one and only Gabe Fleisher. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome back to the show the one, the only, Wake Up to Politics' own Gabe Fleisher. How you doing, buddy?
Doing good, Justin. Thanks for having me.
Throughout all this shutdown, which has lasted a little bit longer than I've thought. I keep coming back to the Fleisher maneuver, is what I'm calling it. The idea that there could be a executive order ending of this shutdown. And we'll get to that in a second. Let me just ask you, because it's been a while since we've talked. Has this shutdown gone longer than you expected? Or do you still expect it to go longer than we expect right now?
First of all, I've never had a maneuver named after me, so I appreciate it. It's an honor. But no, I at the beginning of this shutdown, I was telling people who were asking me, I was saying like 10 days, 2 weeks. That was kind of the range I was thinking of. We have definitely blown past my initial expectations. I think
what were your priors? Because I wonder if they match mine, because I similarly thought this was going to be shorter.
Yeah, that's basically, I thought 10 days, 2 weeks, the Democrats would kind of make their point. Eventually there'd be some sort of deal, which I still think is probably the most likely deal. I just can't tell you when it will be had, that there'd be some sort of deal where Republicans would offer to either negotiate on Obamacare subsidies or hold some sort of vote on Obamacare subsidies. Very similar to the very brief 2018 shutdown, not the one at the end of the year, but the beginning of the year, where Democrats got a vote on the DREAM Act in exchange for ending a shutdown. Thought there'd be some sort of deal along those lines. Democrats would have made their point, but then gotten their vote and then kind of climbed down. And that would last like 10 days, 14 days. That was kind of my initial expectations, which we have obviously blown past.
Why? Why has it lasted longer?
I think we're in a really unique place where for the first time in shutdown history, you have two parties, neither of whom view it as in their benefit to end the shutdown. And so obviously in any negotiation, you need two willing partners to negotiate. I don't even think you have one willing partner right now. You have, for the Republicans, obviously Donald Trump this entire year has been spending the year trying to shrink the federal government, really enjoying, he's already obviously been messing around with the federal budget, trying to, bring more money to the programs that he likes and trying to cut money from the programs he does not like. The shutdown only allows him to supercharge that and do that even more. So it's definitely in his interest, not like ICE deportations have ended, not like, he's finding ways to fund the military. Everything he wants out of the government is continuing. And obviously things that he's less interested in are halting. He has no problem there.
Also, all the things that the Democratic base are mad about, those continue. Right. Nothing that they are mad about has stopped.
And then on the Democratic side, I don't think Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, they've kind of backed themselves into a corner. They backed themselves into the corner by, I think after the kind of experience of March, they didn't really view it as it was not feasible for them to keep their leadership positions and agree to a Republican drafted CR. That wasn't something they felt they were able to do politically. But now that they've gotten into the shutdown, they need to find some way to climb out of it without making people feel like, we just had this whole fight for nothing, which is a very difficult thing to do when the Republicans, they're not going to give you any more rope to try to, help you with your base, obviously. And so, the Republicans are not interested in helping out the Democrats politically there. And the Democrats are just, they're putting on this, shutdown for their base to make a point. But then how do you get to a point? When does the base and the leadership get together and agree, okay, you made your point. Okay, you did what we wanted you to do. Now it can end. But there's no real conversations like that going on. So it just rolls on.
This is my thing. Part of the reason why I think this has gone on longer is because there is a disconnect between Senate, whatever the consensus of the Senate is, and that includes some folks that are obviously angling for Chuck Schumer's job and want to be diametrically opposed to him. That's Chuck Schumer on one side, who's trying to hold it all together. And there's a lot of people that are just institutionalists, establishment Democrats. I don't think that whatever that consensus is, has any real relationship with the Democratic base that has demanded this happen. Now, I also don't think that the Democratic base really understood that what they were doing was putting SNAP in jeopardy. Like, I think that they viewed it as like, this is kind of a supercharged version of a protest and you need to do something. But that's part of the reason why I think that we continue to move on. And some of the off-ramps have just been totally blown by. Like, Thune offered to do a vote. Normally, that'd be something that at least be trial balloon.
I thought they would take that. Like that.
Yeah, well, I thought at least it would be like, you'd get the political headline or the punch bowl headline of like, Democrats thinking about vote thing just to see what the base would do. And then, either say, no, absolutely not, that's ridiculous, or take it. But they didn't even do that. Like, we found that out through Thune. That Thune was like, hey, we offered him that. And then they were like, well, but it's like, I don't think that they have a sense of what would please the base. And I don't think that even if they were to guess, that they're confident in that guess. And so that's where we're at right now, where I've been joking, like, this is any shutdown is a situation that just gets stinkier by the day. And eventually it's so stinky, somebody needs to do something about it. And now it's like, all right, so the goal that they had before was, let's wait for the Obamacare rate increases to hit. That'll be our political win. Well, now SNAP benefits are going to go away the same day. Guess what's going to get a headline over Obamacare rate increases? People not eating today is going to get, more headlines and more traction than people might pay more on January 1st. And so now what do they do? I mean, like, they're out there saying, oh, we should fund SNAP, and this is really Trump's fault because he could fund SNAP. But that's the same thing that the Republicans used to do when it came to Social Security.
Yes, and right, and it's this bizarre scenario where now the Democrats, after kind of thinking about it, now they're, well, I mean, first there was the kind of negotiations about paying, federal workers and furloughed federal workers, and then now about maybe funding just SNAP and just the military. But like, they could fund it all. Like, it's very much in the Democrats' power to fund not just SNAP and not just military, but everything else.
All of it.
Obviously, they're just not willing to do that. And I do think, I think you're right. I mean, I think it's all kind of, I think the exact dynamic you're kind of talking about is kind of proven out by the fact that, like, we're in this very bizarre space where I do think everyone does agree that, essentially the Democrats are doing this, like you're saying, to kind of please their base. And yet the Democratic leaders are still, even as they're picking this fight that they know the base is waiting them to pick, they're still so afraid of their shadow that they're still not even willing to own the blame. Like, they're not willing to even say, like, we are shutting the government down. So it's like this, like, wink, wink, nod, nod thing where, like, they're trying to tell swing voters, we're not shutting the government down. But then to the base, we actually are shutting the government down, but don't tell anyone, but still be happy enough about it that we can keep our jobs, but we're not going to actually tell you that we're the ones shutting the government down because we feel we have to blame Republicans because we're doing your strategy, but we also don't think it's a really politically smart strategy.
But also, this is the Trump shutdown, but also they could end the shutdown if they ended the filibuster, but also the filibuster could, like, end abortion access in all 50 states tomorrow if we're asking them to end it. It's like, all of it is this almost like cargo cult, like this surface level idea of what you're supposed to do in a shutdown.
The
and I do think
you're
that
supposed to use, and it's not real leverage. Like, I think what they're finding today, it's not the leverage that I think a lot of Democratic voters imagined that a shutdown is.
Both of these sides are unpracticed in the role that they're in, because this is a little bit of a Freaky Friday. Like, the Democrats are bad at the idea that for as much as you can clown Ted Cruz for shutting down the government to force Obama to cancel Obamacare, which was never going to happen and is widely looked at as a useless shutdown. But at the end of the day, you knew Ted Cruz hated Obamacare. Okay. And Ted Cruz today can come out and say, I was against Obamacare from the very beginning. And like, he can do that. That's the point of, even if you're cutting off your nose to spite your face, you have to loudly declare your intentions because you hope that eventually people will join you. What is the point here? Like, we have even the thing that they're picking the fight on nominally, these Obamacare subsidies, there's a bipartisan consensus that'll probably kick this can down the road, at least for a few months. Like, this is not a big, you have to fight about this, a blood feud. I don't know. I've been left befuddled by it. And then on the Republican side, they're not great at holding the Democrats account for it. Like, if this were the Democrats and the Republicans were shutting down the government, they'd be voting on this bill twice a day and probably 3 times on Sunday. They wouldn't let anybody go home. And every day the president would come out and say, the following people are dying because of the shutdown today. Here are the people that were murdered by the shutdown in the way that Obama did. Like, there's a way to make this hurt. And the Republicans don't know how to make it hurt. And the Democrats don't know how to make it count. And so now we just sit here like, Okay.
waiting.
I guess we'll all just shrug while people's SNAP benefits run out.
Yeah, and I think you bring up the right point, which is I think the Democrats, because they're not willing to own it, I mean, the message has been so muddled from the beginning. Obviously, eventually they kind of settled on the Obamacare subsidy message, but from the very beginning, I mean, every Democrat had a different idea of why they were doing the shutdown. Was it, to counter just Donald Trump's, abuses of power generally, or alleged abuses of power generally? Was it, to counter rescissions, which I think are very fair area in which to fight a budget fight, but obviously not something that you're going to get a lot of popular support over. So that was shelved. Yeah. And then, then obviously the Obamacare subsidies is, I think, the right one politically to fight over, but the one that's kind of least connected to the actual meat and potatoes of passing a budget bill. And so it's gotten so kind of out of whack. And I do think, if you look back at Chuck Schumer's speech when he voted for the continuing resolution in March, he laid out pretty clearly what would happen if Donald Trump was presiding over a shutdown, all of the, budget maneuvers that it would allow the president to do and all the potential more illegal abuses of power that it would potentially give him to do. And I have yet to see an answer from Chuck Schumer as what has changed from March to then. I mean, his prophecy came true to his credit.
Yes.
Everything he said then, it's happened exactly as he thought it would. And yet I've yet to hear an answer for him of why what he thought would happen in March was unacceptable. But now that it's actually happening, in October, for some reason that makes it okay. And what he, I think the best reason he's given is just that Democrats' poll numbers are better now. So they felt they were in more strength to say to the right, which A, we could argue whether that's even true, but B, obviously has nothing to do with the actual substance of the case he made in March, which was a very correct one from my standpoint, of that handing, that shutdowns really just hand the keys over to the executive branch and really just, I think it was a big question mark, as he said, that it would help them politically. I think it's still not clear it's helping them politically. And substantively, it hurts them on a range of their policy priorities that Democrats care most about, SNAP included, but also a whole range of other programs that historically Democrats have really favored. Chuck Schumer correctly said then that a shutdown would hurt all of those substantive policy goals, and it has. But now that they've gotten into it, they are too far gone to admit that, too deep into it to admit that or to acknowledge it. So yeah, I think in terms of potential endgame, I think, I do think the SNAP benefits, I do think that's going to be a big red flag for Democrats. I think there's going to be more and more of the moderate Democrats that are going to get antsier. I mean, you look at John Ossoff in Georgia, you look at Democrats who have been voting with the party so far, but I don't know politically will be able to, attach themselves to something that's denying so many people, the ability to pay for groceries. And I wouldn't be shocked if we start seeing eventually some movement there. And my guess is what might happen, kind of a reverse a little bit of what happened in March, where kind of Schumer kind of led the charge and then kind of got 9 other Democrats to hesitantly, reluctantly join him. You might have moderate Democrats who go out, and then Chuck Schumer kind of behind closed doors kinds of blesses that effort to kind of finally end the shutdown, where publicly he votes against it and says, I wanted to keep up the fight, but, exactly acts so angry about it, but secretly it's what he wants to happen as well.
I'm kind of surprised that hasn't happened already.
Yeah, I think
and that's where I'm like, that was always the most likely thing to me, was that it's there's a rank and file revolution. And for audio listeners, I'm making very sarcastic air quotes because I think it would be led by Chuck Schumer. And he's like, guys, save me. I had to make a point because I want AOC to run for president and not for my seat. And so I'm getting eaten alive. I have Chris Murphy who licks his chops every time he looks at my office. There's just a lot that I got to deal with right now. So I can't be a part of it, but I need you guys to say, for the good of the Republic, we gotta end this, blah, 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 blah. And yet, you saw a little bit of a blink with Ossoff and Warnock on the military vote. So, and for those of you who are unaware, let's bring you up to speed on what needs to happen right now. You would need 60 votes to get this continuing resolution, which, by the way, only gets us to November 21st. So they're going to have to figure out another thing down the road after that anyway. But right now,
to be very fair, we only need 60 votes if Democrats force Republicans to go through the cloture process, which is another hypothetical option for them. Hypothetical. Is to just not even go through cloture, but yes. 60.
But to hit cloture, you would need 60. There are 53 Republican senators. So you think, oh, you need 7 Democratic votes. No, Rand Paul never votes for continuing resolutions. So now you need 8 Democratic votes. You started with 3 and the 3 have held. So then now you're looking for 5 more that would get to you to where you need to go. During another vote for another bill to pay military members that also failed, you had 2 more Democrats, both Democrats from Georgia, an otherwise red state, that said, okay, well, we'll vote to pay military members, but haven't voted on any of the other clean CR votes. So if you're looking at possible thawing, possible ice breaking, then you would say, okay, let's look at the 2 Republican blue senators from a red state. Maybe you look at blue senators from a red state in Arizona, although those seem unlikely because they're more frontline people. But if one of them broke, you'd probably know that it was over. Either Mark Kelly or Ruben Gallego broke. But other than that, it's just like
Gary Peters, Jean Shaheen, Maggie Hassan in New Hampshire and Michigan. Those are the other, I think.
Or the other from Nevada, because you've already had Catherine Cortez Masto. But I mean, I guess the question is like, is there a fig leaf that you can get? Because like part of the reason why what I've heard from the Senate side is the reason why they didn't go for the Thune vote is because they want to guarantee that there's also going to be a vote in the House because they know that the House is going to be a messier vote than the Senate. The Senate probably will just vote for like, yeah, sure, whatever. Let's figure out a year. Let's kick this down the road so it goes beyond the midterms and let's have that be that. We don't want to deal with this before midterms, so let's go. The House, there's more ideological determination on not funding what they view to be a flawed system in Obamacare, and you're just throwing good money after bad.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. I mean, I think this is the Democratic ask here is obviously being portrayed, if you compare to, like you brought up the Ted Cruz shutdown in 2013. And I think it's obviously seen as like a more reasonable ask than that, because obviously that was the Republicans asking the sitting president to undo his signature policy program. Obviously not going to happen. Well,
technically, the Democrats are asking the president to undo his signature policy program.
True, but that's not the ask anyone actually expects them to
That's not the loud ask that's happening with voice, but that is in their bill that they keep wanting to vote.
But if we're treating the Obamacare subsidies as like the actual ask, that's it's bipartisan. That's true. There is bipartisan support for it. It's viewed as more reasonable and more likely, and I think that's all correct. But it still faces the same fundamental problem that Ted Cruz's ask did, which I'm still not sure. I mean, there's certainly still not majority support within the other party to do it. And we know this because there is a bill right now in the House that would extend the Obamacare subsidies even just by a year. The Democrats want to make them permanent, but this would just do it by a year, proposed by Jen Kiggins. And it was a Republican from Virginia, and it's gotten some Republican support, but like, I think we're looking at, a dozen, 2 dozen Republican members who have co-sponsored this bill. If this was something that had, I think Democrats are treating this as though like they have this huge majority behind them in both chambers of Congress. If that were the case, and now that would be enough to be clear for the bill to pass with just the Republicans and all the Democrats, but you'd be very far from, be a violation of the so-called Hastert rule of, of very far from a majority of the majority that you would think you would need at least something close to that for Mike Johnson to feel comfortable to put on the floor and to keep his job, in a conference that has tried to take his job before. Yeah. Yes, let's put it that way. Fractious. And it's just, there's not much evidence that the Obamacare subsidies, although politically it might hurt Republicans not to extend them, there's just not the evidence so far that there's enough of a groundswell of House Republicans who care enough about the issue and are willing to kind of put their votes behind it, which I think leaves Democrats at the same problem. Even though it is a more kind of bipartisan request they're making, it's still just not one with enough buy-in to be sure, like you say, that it would get through in the House. So I think it's difficult. I think, one other thing that, talking to some people in Washington, people are wondering, maybe could you see a scenario where the Obamacare subsidies, the Democrats kind of announce, okay, it's November 1st, we tried Obamacare subsidies. That's not going to happen, which frankly might be politically better for them anyways than extending them. And then they're able to say, we tried to get your subsidies extended. The Republicans refused. Now it's too late. And then maybe you switch over to the rescissions ask, and maybe you get some sort of scenario where the Mitch McConnell, Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski's, Rand Paul of the world, like some block of Republicans say they won't vote on a rescissions package. And then you kind of switch the asks to the other one. And that wouldn't need Mike Johnson's approval because you could just get a bulwark, kind of like, the gang, the George W. Bush era gang on filibusters of judicial nominees, where you kind of have you don't have leadership buy-in necessarily, but enough of the rank and file to block any, in that case, it was filibusters, in this case, rescissions package. Maybe that could be something of a climb down because that wouldn't require Mike Johnson, like you say. But it's hard. It's hard to think of. And I think the longer this has gone on, the more likely it will just go on longer. And I do think, it is interesting, Donald Trump. I go back and forth. I think politically, obviously all of us want, the troops to be paid, and we all want, members of the military to be paid. I do wonder politically if, I think the reason the snap deadline is so important is because it's really the first example of real widespread pain, outside of just government workers coming from the shutdown. Although, frankly, that could have happened a lot earlier, except for Donald Trump chose to, try to move money
to
around
fund it
potentially legally to pay the troops. And so I think that's kind of why we've gotten this weird dynamic where I think that end game could have happened a lot earlier. Now it's just getting pushed back, if only just because Trump, maybe not politically wisely, chose to kind of postpone the date at which people would start feeling pain. But
it's also because he likes to flex his ability to do things, and we're going to get to that in a second. This is your update, brought to you by TakePoliticsSeriously.com. That is our Substack. You get 2 bonus episodes each and every week if you head on over there. Thank you to everybody who does exactly that. Senator Katie Britt held rare bipartisan talks this week with Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer as lawmakers search for a way to end the 30-day government shutdown. Britt, who chairs the Homeland Security Appropriations Subcommittee, said the discussions focused on laying the groundwork for resuming normal appropriations work. Before speaking with Schumer, Britt met with Senate Majority Leader John Thune about advancing a three-bill funding package, or minibus, alongside stopgap measures lasting through mid-December. Thune later voiced support for the bipartisan talks, but emphasized that any solution would not run through Schumer. Schumer, meanwhile, met with several senators in his caucus, including Jeanine Shaheen and Angus King, who have also been engaged in the negotiations. While Schumer declined to comment publicly, Democratic senators privately expressed cautious optimism that a deal to reopen the government could be reached as soon as next week. Senators left Washington on Thursday after a series of votes and are scheduled to return Monday evening. Conversations reflect a rare moment of bipartisan engagement amid the ongoing standoff between party leaders over spending priorities and the duration of the continuing resolution to end the shutdown. So we have some movement. This comes as rate notices are starting to go out for Obamacare. SNAP is about to dry up on November 1st. The reverberations are being felt. The shutdown has never been stinkier, and it does appear that some people are starting to gag. The Democrats, more specifically, than the Republicans. The Republicans got to decide on what kind of off-ramp they are going to allow the Democrats to take. The Democrats are the one that have to walk this down. They have to determine what they are going to be able to sell to their base. I got to tell you, I would applaud the Republicans for being able to marshal the SNAP stuff in a way that I didn't think that they were going to be able to, because the Democrats are very, very sensitive to the SNAP issue. We're going to continue to talk about a lot of the shutdown elements with Gabe Fleisher, so I'll leave all my thoughts for there. But I'm going to be there Monday. I'm going to be in D.C., and now I think I'm going to make it my business to be in the Capitol. Texas Representative Jasmine Crockett is moving closer to a U.S. Senate run. Run, Jazz, run. Run, Jazz, run. Telling Politico that she's spending heavily on polling to gauge her chances against GOP Senator John Cornyn. Crockett, who rose to prominence for combative exchanges with Republicans like Marjorie Taylor Greene, says she's met with a potential campaign manager and is assessing primary and general election prospects. She admitted that Cornyn would be difficult, but said her campaign would focus on fighting for vulnerable people. If she enters, Crockett would be joining currently announced Democrats James Tallarico and Colin Allred. Beto O'Rourke, Joaquin Castro are also considering bids. That would be an all-star cast. Jasmine Crockett, at least in the polling that I have seen, seems to be a far and away winner for the primary. What would she do in the general? Well, that's a big question. If we flip it on over to the other side, you also have a three-way dance with the Republicans. Ken Paxton, who most recently sued Tylenol. He's the guy who does the thing. And at least he's doing, that is the thing he does, whether or not people like it. That is the thing he's known to do. He sues people that President Trump doesn't like. So he sued Tylenol. Anyway, he's running against John Cornyn, the sitting Republican senator who has fallen out with the base, and now Wesley Hunt, the up-and-coming representative from the Houston area, like Jasmine Crockett. He is running now, and we haven't seen a ton of polling on that primary, at least after Hunt has been in the race. But Hunt sent out an email showing that Cornyn was failing in a general election against Ken Paxton. That's the big pitch for why John Cornyn is in it. Wesley Hunt's move is to get Cornyn to retire. Meanwhile, Hunt said he would graciously not accept any Senate Leadership Fund money or National Republican Senatorial Committee money because he believes that that money should be spent elsewhere where the Republicans need it more. And Cornyn shouldn't be wasting it here in Texas simply because he can't get over the hump against Ken Paxton. Wesley Hunt believes he can get over the hump against Ken Paxton. Now, the funny part about that is that nobody in those organizations were going to give him a dime anyway. And also, if he did win the nomination and Cornyn did retire and he needed the money, he'd take the money. He'd take the money. Trust me. Let's talk about another candidacy. This one is on the launch pad, ready to roll. Elise Stefanik preparing to launch a 2026 campaign for New York governor, positioning herself as the GOP's best shot at breaking up the Democrats' 2-decade-long hold on the office. Axios reports she has assembled a big name, big money campaign staff, including veterans from Trump's 2024 campaign, including strategist Tony Fabrizio, advisor Chris Grant, and data director Tim Saylor. Stefanik has over $13 million in campaign funds, an unprecedented war chest for a New York House Republican, and plans to announce her run shortly after the New York City mayoral election wraps up this Tuesday. Her campaign will target voters who backed Trump in 2024, but not Republican gubernatorial candidate Lee Zeldin in 2022. That's where they believe they can get over the hump. Trump won 3.5 million votes in the state, more than any GOP candidate since 1988. Stefanik also aims to capitalize on backlash to Democratic policies and her high-profile stance against campus anti-Semitism, a theme she'll expand in her upcoming book, Poisoned Ivies. Meanwhile, Democrats, led by Governor Kathy Hochul and the Democratic Governors Association, quickly dismissed her as a Trump loyalist, toxic to New York voters. Stefanik allies believe the state's rightward trend and growing discontent with progressive leadership could make her the most competitive Republican gubernatorial contender in years. And Kathy Hochul has been up on stage with Mamdani. She has joined in with the progressive side. So Stefanik's lane now is more in the center, especially if Stefanik is cooperative with a Mamdani mayorship. You know, a lot of the stuff that Mamdani wants to do, especially when it comes to public transit, the governor's the one who actually controls it. Where will Mamdani's popularity be by the time that the midterms roll around in 26? I don't know. Stefanik's a pretty good speaker. Her against Kathy Hochul, I think in terms of political athleticness, I'd probably go with Elise Stefanik, but I've never seen her in a race this big. So we're going to learn a whole lot about her. I don't think a whole lot about Kathy Hochul as a political athlete. That being said, she seems to be aware and she seems to be making moves. But we have all the time in the world to talk about that. Oh, the midterms. I love it. I love it, love it, love it. TakePoliticsSeriously.com. It's where you have to go. Sign up for a year. Look, sign up now. You've got the midterm year in the bank right now. I mean, come on. I'm going crazy here about these midterms. It's going to be awesome. Anyway, TakePoliticsSeriously.com. Here's the only Trump thing I want to get to. Add it to my list of Democrats why. It seems like their plan now is literally just to rely on the person that they are actively trying to protest. If part of this protest is Donald Trump is a lawless criminal and we cannot be party to anything, we cannot vote for a clean CR. It's not a clean CR. It's a dirty CR because they've already used rescissions powers that we believe is breaking the deal that we made before. You cannot trust this man. Breath. We need Donald Trump to be involved. There's no way that we can go forward. Why aren't you paying attention? Please take my calls. I will meet with you day or night before you go to Asia. President Trump, we need your ear. You need to be involved in this. You're a criminal. I need you. Love XOXO Chuck Schumer. Like, what? I get the political element of it because if you want something out of the House, the only person that can force the House to do whatever he wants is Trump. And he's done it a few times in his own point of view. But like to stake your strategy on him doing that for you is insane to me.
I will slightly disagree with you, only in that I think, I think Donald Trump, within Donald Trump, there are two wolves of there is the side of him that the Democrats are depicting where, he obviously, is, ramming through all sorts of statutes and in some cases the Constitution to kind of get what he wants done and does not care about bipartisanship, does not care about the Democrats, refuses to meet them. And yet you also have this strange thread throughout both Trump terms of Donald Trump being somewhat interested once he's actually at the table. When the first one was with Chuck and Nancy over Chinese food they would have. And then now, obviously, it's Schumer and Jeffries. You do see him, I think that thought of being this very bipartisan president who's getting things done usually doesn't appeal to him, but every once in a while, it kind of does. And even in this shutdown spat, we've seen at a few points, Trump kind of opened the door to meeting with the Democrats. I mean, first there was the meeting before the shutdown started that he said they would have. And then Johnson and Thune got him to cancel it. And then Trump they did end up having it. Then, a few days into the shutdown again, Trump was like, yeah, I'd meet with, reporters asking, will you meet with Schumer? Like, yeah, of course I would. And then Johnson and Thune called him up that night and he was like, no, of course I won't until, they end the shutdown. And so actually, I don't think it's the craziest strategy, if only because I think they're right that if they were to get Trump to sit down, especially if Johnson and Thune were not there, but maybe even with Johnson and Thune, because obviously Trump, they're not going to overrule Trump. He probably would be open to this. Maybe not. I mean, you framed it as why would he do this for them? But if they are able to frame it, do this for yourself. And this is politically better for you. And, we're going to make your life hell if if healthcare costs go up for so many people under your watch. So just do this for yourself. I don't think it's so crazy to imagine Donald Trump might be open to a deal along those lines. And I think, frankly, if Mike Johnson and John Thune were, on his speed dial every time he got close to doing it, it would have happened by now. Because I think already he's expressed interest, but they keep him on a tight leash. I think sometimes we think of him as keeping them on a tight leash, and that's often true, but occasionally it works in the reverse when he does have this kind of impulse for bipartisanship. And that's what Schumer and Jeffries are trying to kind of play on. But so far, Thune and Johnson are kind of getting the better of it.
I do think that he just has a tighter connection to his Congress, obviously, than he did in his first term, where it was often divided and he didn't have a whole lot of people that he trusted. Now he has a lot more people. But if you talk about the cohesive, effective nature of this White House, especially compared to Trump 1.0, I think a lot of it is the idea that Trump's whims, his snap whims, are tested and tempered with this larger, hey, don't do anything that's going to screw over our people in the Senate. Don't do any, they've put their ass out for you here. You really can't go back on it now. Here's the reason my counter to your counter is, yes, Donald Trump would make a deal tomorrow. He'd make a deal flying around Asia right now. He would get on the phone and he would hammer out a deal. The difference is that it's not a deal that in any way I believe Schumer or Jeffries, if we're talking about their base, they would never be able to accept a deal because it would be a Trump deal. What Trump wants, and even said it during the sit down, is they were like, okay, well, here are these subsidies, blah, blah, blah. And Trump's like, cool, let's rewrite Obamacare right now. And Johnson and Thune are like, whoa, like, no. We're not doing that now. We're too far down the line. Either you sign the clean CR and we talk about something like that or nothing. But that's what Trump wants to do. So you're telling me that Chuck Schumer and Jeffries are going to go back to their people and they're going to say, look, we're going to reopen the government and we're going to do a 45-day working panel with the White House to tear down Obama, to repeal and replace Obamacare with Trump care. You're going to sell that to your people? You're going to sell that to your base? Like, get out of here.
No, and I agree with that. I'm certainly, if that's the only deal on the table, then this was never going to happen.
Because that's the deal that he wants to make.
Yes.
Like, you know, you'd be talking him into the idea of either not trusting Thune and Johnson, which he has no inclination to do right now. They've been very loyal. Yep. They have gotten everything that he's wanted done. So there's very little reason why he would take their view politically over everybody else that's around him that I think would be insulating those two leaders. Or you're getting in bed with Donald Trump to actually fix healthcare.
I mean, or you could imagine, I don't know, I still could imagine, and again, clearly we're very far from this actually happening because there's no meeting that we're describing.
Everything is fan fiction at this point.
This is all fantasy, but like you could still imagine some sort of deal where there's a 1 year, 2 year Obamacare subsidy extension, and the Democrats promise in that time to work on Trump care and have the working panel you describe, while they know, everyone involved knows full well, there's never going to be a new healthcare law. You know, as long as Democrats don't actually sign on to a law that hereby repeals the Affordable Care Act, everyone involved knows there will never be another, Trump care bill that would actually get through the House and Senate. So it's kind of the Democrats would just be playing for time if they are able to get a deal where he does extend the subsidies. They say they'll agree to negotiate on some future Trump care deal that will obviously never happen. I still, I don't think that's the craziest thing to happen. I think you're right that it is ironic that it's all hinged on, everything is hinged on Donald Trump agreeing to bipartisanship, which is ostensibly the thing the base wants least is the Democrat leaders to compromise and work with Trump, and which is why they've kind of just backed themselves into a corner. And again, politically, I just don't know that it was necessarily the smartest thing for the Democrats to do to be in any situation where they were trying to get Donald Trump to raise Obamacare subsidies on his watch, because I think politically for the Democrats it's best that these enhanced subsidies expire and they're able to use that as a political talking point. I mean, when something goes just so neatly into your talking points for the midterm elections, which is going to be about Republicans cutting healthcare, why give the Republicans an opportunity to brag about lowering healthcare costs? I don't get it on the political level, on the strategic level. I think for a whole number of reasons, I think it was a misfire, and now they just need to find some way to, get out of it.
But they think they're winning. That's what
they're
I
not
hear.
losing. I mean, they're not, which is true. And they're not, no one's winning, no one's losing. It's like, it's kind of a tie. They're not, it's not going terribly for them. Like their poll numbers.
Look, here's all I know. If I'm going to judge shutdown physics, there's a lot of this stuff that we're talking about. The cloture, but maybe they could do another thing, but you could use this other thing to fill the snap bucket, just like that's great for us. We're nerds. We care about the stuff in a tremendous level more than the average person. You want to know what the average person likes to do? Eat. You want to know what the average person likes to do? Get on a plane that they paid hundreds of dollars for a ticket for. Who the
average person thinks, which party the average person thinks is A, controlling government, and B, is opposed to SNAP benefits? The Republicans. So I agree. SNAP benefits are the thing that anybody in this scenario cares most about. Am I convinced that the Democrats of the party, they will necessarily blame if SNAP benefits run out? I'm not sure of that. I don't think the polling data bears that out so far. And I agree by taking your theory, which I agree with, of let's imagine the average voter who's not so up on the cloture rules and how many votes it takes to end debate on a bill in the Senate, all this stuff. I think for the same reason you point out that like we're in this Freaky Friday world where Democrats are defending closing the government and Republicans are trying to get it reopened, that same dynamic in some ways works in the Democrats' favor politically in this narrow sense of when push comes to shove and you're asked who's to blame for the shutdown. I think people are not so sure that you're supposed to blame the Democrats when they do know that.
I agreed with that.
He's the party more associated with cutting entitlements.
I agreed with that in the first few weeks. And that was part of the reason why I thought in the first few weeks, it's like, okay, this is great. Great taste, less filling. The Republicans get the Lifetime Achievement Award for shutting down the government. So we can shut down the government and people just reflexively blame the Republicans for it. And we can say that we fought. Let's do that. Cool. Boom. We'll move it along. I still believe in the idea that the party that shuts down the government eventually gets blamed for it. Like, yes, I know you can point. You have not seen attrition really in either party. People have just kind of let it slide. And that's going to be the case until you start feeling pain, at which point people are going to tune into it a little bit. And when they tune into a little bit, there's going to be one party that's voting when those votes start happening and it's the Democrats refuse to open the government is the headline. That's where you start to feel the pain. And that's where I do think that you see meaningful attrition.
Yeah, I think that's very possible. I think, I will just note, the polling data up to this point, and we haven't reached the kind of pain point you're describing. So maybe we'll see a pivot when that point comes. Does not for all the messaging that has gone into the shutdown on both sides and all the headlines that have correctly reported, Republicans put up a CR for a vote, Democrats reject it. There's yet to really be any movement in the polls, which I suspect is a reflection of, at the end of the day, it is true the Democratic Party is unpopular, but Donald Trump is also very unpopular. He's much more associated with cutting government. But I think your theory that could shift as people kind of tune into more, it's very possible. We're going to have to wait and see.
Yeah, I mean, and the White House is also not wanting to make this a big thing. That is a big difference between previous shutdowns with the Democratic president, is that they've wanted to make it their biggest thing every single day. Trump has a million other. Trump's literally in a few hours as we're recording this on Wednesday, and this will probably already be news by the time that this airs, but Trump's going to lay out a big trade deal with China. He doesn't want the shutdown overshadowing that. He wants this to be look, from Liberation Day to now, nobody would negotiate as hard as I could for America. And look at this beautiful, strong man, Xi, what a great friendship China and America have, blah, 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 blah. That's what he wants there. It's not let me bring up a bunch of people. I'm going to feed them Subway sandwiches because I'm going to let them take them home because their SNAP benefits are going to run out. That's what Obama would have done. But
you have to wonder, is that in a way, the fact that the president and the White House had thrown so many other things, at the wall during this shutdown, is that in a way an admission that they are worried that they will take the political blame for it, and that's why they're trying to distract from it, because they don't want the headlines to be about the shutdown because they're worried that will mean Republican blame? Or is it just because Donald Trump is kind of bored talking about the shutdown and just doesn't want the Democrats to be in the headlines, even if it would serve him for Democrats to be in the headlines?
I think Trump not backdooring Thune and Johnson is the limit to his attention span to the shutdown. He's like, you guys have the shutdown. You guys are doing great. It's fine. Nobody's yelling at me right now. But it's I'm going to build the ballroom. I'm going to negotiate these trade deals. I'm going to yell at various people I'm going to pardon George Santos. I'm going to do Trump things. You do you guys things. And it's just not wired in his brain to think of it like that, that we need to black out the sun media wise in the way that the Democrats would. I do think, and this is where I'm sure that there's conservative listeners that are probably yelling at their podcast device, that the media has covered this shutdown in a different kind of way than they did in Democratic shutdowns. You don't see as many, oh my God, the doors are locked in the public parks feature stories in the way
the White House
has
handled the shutdown differently. They've reduced the pay. Mike Johnson said it himself the other day that in the 2013 shutdown, Barack Obama, dialed the pain dial up to 10, and Trump has, put it down to 1 or 2. And there's truth to that to some degree. Again, was that the politically right call for Donald Trump? I don't know. It makes it harder for him to blame put some huge political millstone.
And also, he will not get credit for it.
Right.
No one's going to be thank God
the
Donald Trump.
Things keep going on. But that part of that is because this it has, provably been a less impactful shutdown than other ones because Donald Trump has, just as Chuck Schumer warned he would try to do in the shutdown, not that it's legal, but it was very predictable, just grabbed into pots of money that he wants to try to avoid the amount of pain that normally would accompany a shutdown by now and would have driven that sort of coverage you're describing.
Which brings us to the Fleisher maneuver. So we talked about this months and months and months ago, and here's what I want. Because I'm shocked that nobody in the conservative media ecosystem has run with this. Nobody's made a big deal. So I'm going to cut this out. I'm going to put this out there. I need everybody to spread it around to wherever you think, because nobody's talking about this. They're talking about eliminating the filibuster. They're talking about all these other ways that you can end the shutdown. Gabe Fleisher, how can Donald Trump today on the phone end this?
One easy trick. The whole reason, as we talked about a few months ago, that government shutdowns exist, arguably it is because of the Anti-Deficiency Act, which is a 19th century law that prevents government funding being used without appropriations. But I say arguably because that is not how the Anti-Deficiency Act was interpreted for a very long time, for most of the history of this country, until 1980, which was when Benjamin Civiletti, who was Jimmy Carter's Attorney General, put out a memo saying, actually, when the Anti-Deficiency Act, I interpret that to mean not what has normally happened, which is just when appropriations expire, we just kind of continue on. But actually, I interpret it to mean we need to have government shutdowns. That is the only reason government shutdowns ever started, was because of a memo by the Attorney General, which would lead one to believe that all it would take to end government shutdowns and to change that interpretation would be a memo from tomorrow from Attorney General Pam Bondi saying, actually, I view the Anti-Deficiency Act as it was interpreted, from 1870 to 1970s. Yep. To mean that we just kind of continue on, kind of similar to what we do now when we have continuing resolutions. And that's one easy trick, and government shutdowns would be over.
That would be it. It just one memo from Pam Bondi, put it on Truth Social. Next thing you know, everybody gets paid. No worries about grabbing stuff hither and yon. Now, the reason why I assume stuff like this doesn't even get talked about in Republican circles is because Republicans kind of like shutdowns.
Exactly.
Like Republicans, historically, this has been their move.
Exactly.
So they're like, wait a minute, why are we going to take this thing that periodically we like to do away from us? But if anybody was going to do it, it would be Donald Trump and Pam Bondi. And I'm shocked. Any of yous conservative media people, this is free content. You could run with this. Run with it. And at least make it how is Marjorie Taylor Greene not talking about this? She's talking about ending the filibuster. She's off on her own warpath these days. MTG, tell Bondi to issue the memo.
Yeah, no, I'm a little bit surprised as well, and I think ultimately you're right. I think the reason is I think Donald Trump doesn't really mind this current shutdown, and Republicans don't really like the idea of having shutdowns as kind of potential leverage in the future, shaky leverage as it may be, but perceived leverage, I suppose, in the future. But I think you're right. If anyone were to do it, it would be Donald Trump. We know that he's talked about ending the debt ceiling. He talked at the very beginning of his term about completely abolishing the debt ceiling forever. So along those lines, it does seem like something that might appeal to him, might be this move, that would maybe get him, he would be the president that ended shutdowns forever, that ended this chaos, that put all
feels very Trumpy.
It does.
Feels very Trumpy.
It's obviously a huge flex of executive power, which he loves to do. I mean, I will note that, legally, you could imagine a scenario where Democrats try to fight it legally. This is very untested legal ground. There's, very few court cases that have hinged about this. I will note one interesting little quirk, or one little interesting piece of the timeline that I laid out. So Benjamin Civiletti is the person who's most associated with the memo I described, but he actually only did it because there was a congresswoman from Maryland who, side note, you'll appreciate this side note, who is the only member of Congress who has been declared, her seat has been declared vacant by the rest of the House because she later had a coma. It was in a coma for months. And it's the only time for medical reasons the House has said this seat is vacant, but that's not the point. Gladys Stillman is her name. But she is the woman that first kind of was looking into this and was trying to get Benjamin Civiletti to put out this memo. But before she did that, she went to the GAO, which is kind of, Congress's in-house auditor, and said, don't you think this is how we should interpret the Anti-Deficiency Act? And now the GAO is charged with enforcing shutdowns and enforcing the anti-deficiency act. But when she did that, they said no. They said, we don't agree with this interpretation that you're putting, and we don't agree. And then she went to Benjamin Civiletti, the Carter Justice Department, and they did agree with her. But I would expect that GAO opinion from either 1979, 1980, 1981 would play an interesting role in any legal battle that would occur, because that is a legal interpretation from that time from Congress itself, or from an agency within Congress. That actually kind of argued for the pre-Civiletti interpretation. So it would be
man, you want to know what?
Legally.
I think I'll just, because I'm going to be in DC Monday. I'm just going to walk the halls. I'm just going to ask anybody that's there, like, are you in support of Pam Bondi reversing the Civiletti memo and ending the shutdown?
I did that last week. I did not about Pam Bondi specifically, but I wrote a piece last week, which people can read in my newsletter, about different ways that shutdowns could be ended. This is one of them, but other potential ideas. And I canvassed a lot of lawmakers about it. And interestingly, without me prompting her, most of the Republicans were like, yes, we're all for it. Not necessarily Pam Bondi doing anything, but ideas like Ron Johnson's put forward a bill that would have just automatic CRs instead of shutdowns.
Yeah.
A lot of Republicans are interested in that. All the Democrats were like, no, which makes sense, obviously, because they're shutting the government down.
Because they're currently doing it,
Except for Jean Shaheen from New Hampshire, without me prompting her, said that she thinks the Trump administration, I said, do you think you support proposals to end shutdowns forever? She said she thinks Trump should do that right now, or she said we should go back to how we do it in the 80s, how we did it for the 80s. I'm paraphrasing, but that was one Democratic lawmaker who, without me even prompting her, did express support for this maneuver.
Classic. Establishment politician move. We should just go back to doing it the way we did in the 80s. I don't know. I feel like this is something that has its time. And all I'll say is this: for anybody who wants to think that you're going to put the concept of government shutdown induced ground stoppages or TSA delays around the Thanksgiving season, you're crazy. You are delulu. Like, that is insanity if you think that that's a good idea politically, or that that's going to end well for anybody. You're all going to get absolutely smashed for it. Like, this needs to end in the next week or so, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think November 1st is kind of the next kind of real kind of pain point in the horizon. And then after that, it's the Thanksgiving holiday. I mean, we've already seen, I think, Sean Duffy has said that the normal rate of flight delays pegged to FAA staffing shortages is 5%. He said there's days during the government shutdown, it's gone as high as 53%. More than half delays being purely because of FAA shortages. We've seen record numbers of FAA staffers, which shouldn't be too surprising. We're not paying them, and so they are not wanting to go to work. I could understand that. Not that I'm encouraging them to do it, but you can kind of understand where people might be coming from, not wanting to work without pay. And I think we would only see that kind of that will be kind of the next pain point if it gets that far.
All right, last question, and this is related to the shutdown because people have mentioned it, but I do think that it's worth kind of asking the bigger term picture about the filibuster. Because that in amongst the muddled Democratic messaging, one of the things is, the Republicans can just eliminate the filibuster. Now, it's an interesting idea to tell them to eliminate the filibuster when they control all three phases of government, because it basically is like, oh no, please run every Republican bill you possibly can and sign it into law as fast as possible. But it does, especially if you've seen some of the thawing on the Republican side of like, I don't know, maybe we need to. They're going to take it away the next time they get control of the Senate anyway. We might as well get first crack at the apple. Do we think that the filibuster is long for this world?
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, I don't think it, I do not, I think it will survive this shutdown. But I think, and I've said before, I think like the biggest thing coming in American politics that I would normally say no one is talking about, now, as you point out, some people are talking about, is that I don't think the Senate filibuster is going to last very long. And I think that will completely alter how American politics, how politics are done in this country, because suddenly when you do have, at some point, I do think in the near future, I think likely the next Democratic trifecta, you do have presidents, presidents and congressional majorities that will actually be able to accomplish priorities so far beyond what they've been able to up to this point. I mean, we are going to, I think, I think, if we zoom kind of decades into the future, and if we assume that the filibusters, I think it will be kind of gone in the next decade or so, and you think you're the American political observers of like the 2040s and 50s, whoever's hosting this podcast, writing my newsletter, equivalent in 2040s and 50s, they will look back at American presidencies and be like, you were in office for 8 years and you got one healthcare law, or you were in office for 4 years for Trump's first term and you got one tax cut law. Like, that's what presidencies look like. And it will completely change how we judge how much presidents accomplish in their terms, because suddenly what has been, for our purposes, one or two major pieces of legislation, it'll be huge flurries of legislation. So I think that's a huge change coming down the pike. I think as much as Democrats are trying to get Republicans to do it for them, which I think is frankly a little bit, I think again, it goes under the category of Democrats kind of afraid of their shadow. It's something they want to get done, but are afraid of taking the political hit of doing it themselves. Although I am skeptical there would be any political hit of undoing a rule that I don't really think most people really understand. But either way, I don't think the Democrats will be successful in getting the Republicans to do it for them. But certainly, you've seen this crescendo in the Democratic side. Now you're starting to see it from kind of MAGA-based Republicans as well, like Marjorie Taylor Greene. At some point, Democrats were obviously 2 votes away from doing it last time, and those 2 senators will no longer be in the Senate, are no longer in the Senate. And so I think it's going to probably be the next Democratic trifecta that will do it.
Unless we have new ones have spawned. Oh, I guess Fetterman was for it. Fetterman was for getting rid of the filibuster.
That was a huge part of his campaign. We'd see if he would stick to it, but about not being the Joe Manchin and about eliminating the filibuster, that was like one of his major talking points, of course.
Yeah, but that was when he was a lot more aligned with his own party.
This is true.
I feel like he is as his own party is openly floating articles to Axios about how much they're licking their chops to replace him. Who knows whether or not he's in that same kind of mood.
Which also brings up the point, who knows if he's even a member of the next Senate Democratic majority. Perhaps it'll be Senator Lang.
What is your thought about it? Because my thought is like, he's pretty popular still. Like, you look at his approval ratings in Pennsylvania, like they might wish to get him out of there. I don't know if it's going to be as easy as they think it'll be.
He is very popular, but that is mainly because of Republicans and independents that have inflated his approval rating, which may be an argument for why he is a strong general election candidate and they shouldn't do that, but is not going to be of particular help to him in a Democratic primary if Conor Lamb chooses to run against him. I think
what a role reversal there,
yes,
right?
It's fascinating.
Because Fetterman was looked at as the true blue progressive that was running over the establishment stooge in Conor Lamb, and now they're in totally opposite positions.
It's fascinating, and I suspect Lamb would have big shot. I'd also wonder. I think Fetterman's much more, I think, aggressive than like you think of both Manchin and Sinema, who basically, more Sinema, I guess, basically in that exact same position, just chose not to run again. I do think Fetterman is much more, enjoys
he'll run
battles, except he does not seem to love the job so much and does not seem to do it so much. He went months without attending any Senate hearings, does not really hold town halls. So you do wonder, obviously he's had health issues and family, things with his family. And clearly a lot of personal issues. So you do wonder if perhaps he'll use that as some way to climb down, although he does like a fight. So that will be a fascinating for me to watch. You're right. I don't know. I cannot think of an example of a rematch like that is quite literally a 180 role reversal. Like
I'll tell you who would love to run against somebody other than John Fetterman, and that is the Republican Party of Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. They would be very, very, very excited to. The NRSC would be thrilled to find the most centrist Republican they possibly can to run in that state.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right.
Gabe Fleisher, Wake Up to Politics is the newsletter. Where can people find it?
wakeuptopolitics.com.
There we go. Thank you very much, man.
Thanks, Justin. Always good to talk with you.
And that'll wrap it up for us today. Politics, written and hosted by me, Justin Robert Young, for Dog and Pony Show Audio in Austin, Texas. You can send me an email, theyoungamerican@gmail.com. Our editor and producer is Will Saddleberg. Find, follow, and share video clips of the show on TikTok, Justin R. Young, Instagram, Justin R. Young, Twitter, Justin R. Young, and on YouTube, you can catch all of our full video episodes at Politics. Just search for Politics. That's what we want. Support me with a one-time donation, paypal.me/payjury. Venmo is Justin-Young-20. Cash App is PX3 Cash, and you can send me anything you'd like in the mail. Post Office Box 153184, Austin, Texas, 78715. Of course, you can always get our bonus content at TakePoliticsSeriously.com. That, again, is our Substack. Paying members get 2 bonus episodes each and every week. Thank you to everybody. We got renewals coming up in the next week. Thank you, guys. Thank you. You're the reason why I get a chance to fly to D.C. and see if I can end the shutdown. I'm going to try and end the shutdown. Anyway, if you want your name read on the show, you got to come in at the foundational tier, including Sonny Black, L3PO, Peepaw, Scott, Middle-Aged Mike, Tom, Sarah Jeannie, Jeremy, Pro Idiot, Chiller Tomatoes. Oh, yeah, it's Adam, Neil, AB Puppy, Dr. Whiskey, Michael, Fat Tony's PJs from New York, Will, The Borge, B, Matthew, Matt, Andrew, Edwin, Sam, Andrew, Phil, Edison, Devon, Paul, a dog named Checkers, Gloria, Jerry, Trucker, John, Berkeley, Stephen, and Zombie Doc. You want your name read on the show? One place to do it. Thank you to everybody who goes to TakePoliticsSeriously.com. Thank you to everybody who throws us a one-time donation. I'm back on the road. You want to help me buy rounds for people at the tune-in on Saturday night at 8 p.m. That's where I'm going to be, unless there's a ground halt that makes my flight delayed. Then come on in. The water's fine. Next week, live from D.C., we will be breaking down the election results. Dave Leventhal will be on the show. Probably a cavalcade of stars. I'm going to get as many different voices on the show for Tuesday's episode as possible. Friends, Romans, countrymen. A reminder that some shows talk about politics, others talk about politics, and still more talk about politics. But on this All Hallows Eve, we all have to remember that this is the only show that dares discuss all 3. Happy Halloween!
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.
Dog and Pony Show audio.